Hi, this is Tim Mackesy from Atlanta, Georgia. It's August of 2020, and I'm here with a guest named Jack. And I helped him when he was a kid doing speech therapy. He did well, then he needed a tune-up at the beginning of high school. Then he rode a nice wave, ending up the spring of his senior year in high school with an email. Hey, Tim, it's Jack. I'm going to be my high school valedictorian, and I want to practice my speech with you, which was so thrilling. I said, bring it on. And what makes Jack unique is that his stuttering was only one of the challenges he's had. So welcome, Jack.
Hey Tim, thank you again for having me back here. And yes, growing up as a kid, I was diagnosed with several, as people say, disabilities. And in addition to my stutter, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD. So growing up as a kid definitely presented its own challenges. I was bullied, teased, all the normal things that a person who stutters will typically go through.
Yeah, so for those of you who are not familiar, dysgraphia is trouble with your handwriting. And Jack said he had dyslexia, which is difficult to read, spell, and to comprehend what you're reading, and attention deficit, yet somehow he becomes the valedictorian, which is pretty amazing. You persevered through all of it. A few minutes ago, before the mic turned on, we were talking about the definition of disability. What's a disability from a legal standpoint, and how a person with challenges should use the word in defining themselves and the challenges in front of them. Please expand on what you mean between the difference between being a disabled person or not, how we define the word.
Well, legally, disability mainly refers to someone with a handicap, someone who needs help in different situations. But I've never, the weird thing is I've never really used that word to describe myself. Yes, I have 4 different things that, from a legal standpoint, are disabilities. But growing up, I was never taught to really associate myself with having a disability. It was more of learning how to overcome these challenges, and I was taught from a young age that it's not it's not the stuttering, it's not the dyslexia, it's not the ADHD, it's not the dysgraphia. None of those things are going to be what defines you. What's going to be the defining factor in your life is, okay, you have these challenges in your life. Are you going to sit down and just deal with, are you going to sit down and let those beat on you, or are you going to find a way to overcome them and be better for it? So I guess as a kid, I never really thought of myself as having disabilities, and I guess that continues today.
Exactly. You had 4 on paper, but none in your mind. You didn't label yourself. Your parents didn't either. It's more like, okay, so you have these hurdles in front of you. We'll get tutoring. We'll work hard to overcome them. And clearly the results, a young man who becomes his high school valedictorian, and you finish college, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So when I looked up the definition of disability, I see a physical or mental condition that limits a person's movements, senses, or activities. Another definition is a disadvantage or handicap, especially one imposed or recognized by the law. In 1990, 30 years ago, the ADA was passed to protect people from discrimination from things such as a pre-existing health condition or a challenge like stuttering. It was a massive law, very important. We need the ADA to protect against discrimination in the workplace. So if I stutter, I can't be discriminated against for getting a job, nor moving up the ladder. We need it to protect children at school. A 504 plan or an IEP is in place to protect children from being teased and bullied and to receive accommodations. Now, I want to stress that accommodations are different than being enabled. Being enabled means you're being excused. For example, Tim doesn't have to do his report in front of the class. He can do it in privacy for only the teacher. Or we don't call on Tim in Spanish because he stutters. That's a slippery slope, because later the child is going to go to college. So you yourself, Jack, you had to get through the dyslexia, dysgraphia, the attention and stuttering all at once. Do you also agree that we want to support children to empower them to take on these challenges?
Yes, of course. There's a very large difference between students needing accommodations for certain challenges that they have, but also putting them in a position in which they can triumph over those challenges is more important than protecting them from it. I remember what made me, first of all, when my school approached me and said that I was going to have, I was en route to be valedictorian and might have to make a speech, I was terrified. I even thought about tanking my grades so I wouldn't have to speak. But what made me decide not to do that was their next offer of, if you are going to be speaking at graduation, we can just record it and put it on a projector so you don't have to talk about it, or so you don't have to talk in front of everyone. And that didn't make me mad. It just didn't sit well with me. I realized then that this is going to be either people are on graduation day, they're either going to see someone who stutters up on stage and owning up to it and dealing with it, or they're going to see someone sitting next to them but also on a projector and basically doing something different than they would because of his stutter.
Wow, that's true. That's true. That your stuttering could be defined by a video versus a live appearance. Like Jack was afraid to speak, so he submitted a video. That kind of courage went to college. So we've covered the important role of the ADA and disability, but now we're going to make a complete break to, if you're a person who stutters or if you have dyslexia or a challenge, the difference between how you define if you're disabled or not. Because when it comes to human potential, self-help and self-improvement, we have to make that clean break. I just read about a guy named Rob Jones. He came back from Afghanistan with no legs. He was fitted with prosthetic legs. In 2017, Rob Jones ran 31 marathons in 31 days in 31 different cities with prosthetic legs. Is he disabled? Here in Georgia, a person that I have followed has authored the book No Excuses. Kyle Maynard was born with no arms and no legs. He refused prosthetic arms and legs. He was as independent as possible. He went on to play football, believe it or not, and then wrestling. He lost his first 40 matches in high school, and then he went 25-10 with 8 pins as a senior, almost making the state tournament. So Kyle's parents raised him to be as independent as possible. When we come to dyslexia, a quick look on the internet, we see that Tom Cruise, Keanu Reeves, and Bella Thorne, all from the acting community, all have dyslexia. So they had to take that on to learn their roles, to read their lines, read their scripts, and be massive stars. In the world of ADHD, we have Simone Biles from gymnastics, Karina Smirnoff, the dancer, Howie Mandel, and Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps, with 28 medals in the Olympics, has attention deficit disorder. In the world of dysgraphia, trouble writing, you're in good company. You have Albert Einstein, General George Patton, and Agatha Christie, the author, had dysgraphia. Amazing. In stuttering, King George VI, Joe Biden, James Earl Jones. So all of those people have a disability on paper, and they used it as a rally of sorts. In each of those cases, those individuals I named all took on their challenge head on to be as successful as they are. Briefly, in my childhood, I grew up with a stutter. I was teased and bullied. One of the most important things I did in college was to drive a taxi cab. Back in the day when you actually held the radio in your hand and you called and you had to speak and everyone could hear you, people in your car and every other car. Then I began to wait tables. Then I worked at the front desk of a hotel and went into management at the hotel. Then I decided to go back to graduate school for speech pathology. 28 years after that, and I'm here today. That was very difficult to go through graduate school in the early couple years being a speech therapist and thinking I can't stutter anymore. It was very difficult. I've made it. I've survived it. I had to face it. Now, you also, in high school, used to wrestle. Mm-hmm. And if I understand correctly, you were hurt seriously. Please talk about that.
So when I was little, I wasn't hurt in wrestling. I was hurt before then. But what happened was I had dislocated part of my elbow. That's apparently difficult to dislocate. So the doctor misdiagnosed it as a break. And long story short, he did a surgery that was unnecessary, and I can't really bend my arm well. I can't turn it. But this all happened gradually. So when I got to high school and was wrestling, I was just always in so much pain, and my arm was hurting. And so my mom took me to see a doctor who told me the only sport I could ever potentially play again would be swimming. And I was just devastated by that. And so my mom took me to another doctor for a second opinion, who said, well, your arm cannot get any worse than it is. It's not. So good news is wrestling is not going to hurt your arm any more than it is. The bad news is if you want to do it, you're going to have to put up with the pain and the disadvantages that are going to come along with basically wrestling with 1.5 arms. And so I was actually really excited about that because it meant I got to keep wrestling. And so the way I handled wrestling was I developed moves. I learned moves that would use my right arm more than my left. I would wear 2 arm braces so my opponents wouldn't know which arm was injured. Mm-hmm. I just learned to basically find an advantage where there was a disadvantage, and it really
find
helped.
Advantages where there's a disadvantage. I like that. Mm-hmm. It's like the quote, do or do not, there is no try. That's Yoda, of course, right? So you learn strategies to communicate well, and you learn how to speak up. That's a key variable in middle school and high school, that even though I stutter and maybe I have trouble spelling and reading, I'm still going to speak up because I know in the end I'll get stronger and better. And that fighting spirit came out when you wanted to wrestle, even when you were told by one doctor you couldn't. Mm-hmm. So your valedictorian speech, you remember you came in here 3 weeks before it, At that point, you decided, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to record it. I'm going to do it live. So the first thing we did was we used a little bit of CBT to locate and edit and delete any anxiety. And then you recall the phrasing strategy. Do you want to share about that?
Oh, yeah. Phrasing is one of, I think, the most helpful tools that anyone who stutters can use, especially when they're put in a role where they're going to have to speak publicly. So the concept of that is you basically will phrase out whatever you're going to say into different chunks, and you'll say each part a little separately. And the way that helps is it forces you to know what you're going to say. You know everything backwards and forwards. So we went through my speech, and we set up the phrasing for all of it, and we practiced it. And that's been something I've done ever since then. In any presentation in college I had to do, I printed it out and I had it marked up so I could phrase it. And I think that's really one of the best tools that anyone who stutters can learn.
Right. So phrasing appeared in the King's Speech when King George VI had to give his wartime address. It was marked into phrases by his therapist, Logue. For those of you who've seen the movie, it's a fantastic movie. So phrasing is an age-old proven strategy. It's chunking the words into groups. So you then went on to college. And do you want to talk about a couple of things that you had to face in college?
Yeah. I remember earlier we talked about enabling. And basically all of my professors very quickly learned that I stuttered. And in an effort to be kind, and in any class that had oral presentations, every single professor took me aside and said, hey, you don't have to do this in front of the class. You can do it alone or with me, or like either way you want to do it is fine. And so I just said, no, I'm gonna do it in person. And I think that was a really good decision for me, because it taught me that I can't run from this. I've got to deal with it.
Yes.
I also went ahead and joined the mock trial team, which, if you don't know what mock trial is, it's basically putting yourself in a lot of pressure in a trial setting and debating live with people. So
are you crazy? You stutter, you had a choice to do it, and you still did mock trial? Oh my goodness, man. Now you want to go to law school, I understand.
Yes.
Seems to me a lawyer has to talk a lot. You feel ready for this, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that, again, I think we talked earlier about turning disadvantages into advantages. Of course, growing up with stuttering was very difficult for me as a child. It's really had a profound impact in the way I handle public speaking now, because in the past I was so scared of stuttering in public speaking. That's what I focused on. And so once I learned the tools to deal with my stutter and to learn how to speak publicly and to let go of the anxieties surrounding it, my anxiety of public speaking just disappeared, because I was so focused on the anxiety coming from stuttering. Once I beat that anxiety, I wasn't scared of speaking in public. So when my friends would have to speak orally, they would be so nervous, and I really don't understand that anymore. It's really very cool and weird feeling.
Well, you now have a toolbox that some of your friends who don't stutter lack a toolbox, meaning you get your head straight, you know how to write your speech well in advance, you know how to mark it into phrases, you know how to say it in the mirror over and over again because you want to nail it. Mm-hmm. Your valedictorian speech was 6.5 minutes. You had 3 stutters. And that was just a masterpiece from the standpoint that you practiced so hard and executed it so well. It's fine that you stuttered, and anyone out there, it's okay if you talk and stutter. If someone does make a goal that they want to nail and they nail it, that's great. That's like in sports. If you want the home run, you want to win the tournament, I got to a point with my stuttering where it was like playing chess. If I had anxiety before a meeting, for example, I wanted to figure out what am I thinking, what am I feeling that causes the anxiety, and what am I going to do with how I talk, because I personally wanted the satisfaction of winning the chess match against my opponent, which was messing with my head and causing anxiety. So I enjoyed the chess match with the stuttering. So coming full circle here, stuttering is by the letter of the law a disability. Dyslexia is, dysgraphia, attention deficit, that you can't be discriminated against because you have it. And the ADA is a great thing. Protect people in the workplace, people at school, and out in society. From a personal improvement, think back of Rob Jones coming back from Afghanistan with no legs and doing 31 marathons in 31 days in 31 cities. I've never met him, but I bet if he was here on this podcast and if I were to ask Rob, are you disabled? I have a feeling he would say, no, I'm able. It's hard, but I do it. So the human spirit, taking on challenges, it's essential that a person looks at these challenges like stuttering as an opportunity, as you said, turning a disadvantage into an advantage. So what advice would you have for children who feel like they're up against the wall and alone, difficulty reading and talking and things like that?
I would say, first of all, to understand that you are not alone. There are a lot of people who deal with stuttering, who deal with ADHD, who deal with dysgraphia, dyslexia, so on and so forth. But what makes people who have these things great, what actually defines these people is not that they have them in the first place. It's that they put themselves in positions that are very uncomfortable at first, but they do it so that they learn how not just to survive with a disability, but to thrive in spite of it. And I think that's what the wrestler with no limbs does. The amputee or the marathon runner with no arms or legs. He's putting himself in they're all putting themselves in places where they can learn to better themselves. So I would say that first of all, you're not alone, and second of all, think about what you're scared of, and do it. Don't let your teacher tell you, or don't take the opportunity to get out of something. Don't take the easy way out.
Exactly. You'll pay later. Every August, I get the phone call. My child just went from middle school to high school. He's in 9th grade, and his stuttering has blown up. I don't know why. Then the phone rings the next day. My college student just got into her dormitory, and all of a sudden she's in a crisis with stuttering. What happened is they're having to face a new environment, maybe they used to avoid, and now they're getting into a new spot, and they're stressed out, and their stuttering has exacerbated. It reminds me of Mandela's quote, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the triumph over fear." And it also reminds me of a book, a self-help book, "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways" by Jeffers, that you might enjoy. So, Jack, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait to hear from you 3 years from now, 3.5 years from now, when you finish law school. I know without a doubt that you're prepared to communicate in the courtroom, to do mock trial, debate, get called on in lecture halls, and that you're going to be fierce all the way through it. I also think that you're going to go into a sort of law, a law practice that's helpful to people. Do you agree with that?
I think so. I haven't picked out the exact area that I want to practice, but I'm really excited to get out there and make a difference. And thank you so much for having me. It was great being able to do this.
Yeah, I've helped no less than 10 attorneys who stutter, and that tells you right away that you can practice law and stutter.
Absolutely.
In addition to the 10 who already practice, I've probably helped 10 get in or get through. So this is something you can do if your mind's set. Thank you so much for your time, Jack.
Thank you.